forced out the tips of hollow rotor blades. This particular air pressure jet, APJ for short, is the Voljet SX-255, which was developed and test-flown in California in 1982. The SX-255 was an experimentally licensed proof-of-concept prototype, which led to the present development of the Voljet 585, a 5-place, single-turbine civil helicopter, the building of which is scheduled to begin in 1986. The SX-255 was preceded by 2 other prototypes successfully built and flown by founders of Voljet International, and was the result of several years of design, development, and testing of APJ helicopters. The fundamental difference between an APJ helicopter and other helicopters is the APJ's elimination of the undesirable effects of torque. The most obvious result of the torqueless drive system is, as can be easily seen here, the elimination of the long tail boom and the tail rotor it supports. As we'll see later, this is only one of many significant advantages that APJ helicopters have over their shaft-driven counterparts. The Voljet 585 is the full realization of the high-performance, economical, torqueless helicopter that has so long eluded the helicopter industry. But how does the air pressure jet helicopter work? To fully appreciate the answer to this question, let's first take a look at how the common shaft-driven helicopter works. The shaft-driven helicopter uses an engine to turn its rotor with a drive shaft through a transmission, much the same as a car has its driving wheels turned on their axles. This mechanical linkage between the engine and the rotor creates a force known as torque, which tends to rotate the fuselage in the direction opposite that of the rotor. A tail rotor is most commonly used to counteract this force in order to maintain the aircraft's stability and to provide directional control. The APJ helicopter simply uses its engine to drive an air compressor, which forces compressed air through a hollow rotor system and out the rear of the tips of the rotor blades. Because the rotor is turned from the blade tips rather than from a central drive shaft, the unwanted effect of torque is eliminated, and with it, the need for a tail rotor. Directional control is maintained simply by deflecting the engine exhaust stream with a vertically mounted rudder. Other movements of the aircraft are accomplished with controls identical to those in a shaft-driven helicopter. The air pressure jet concept is not a new idea. Earlier developmental efforts, however, were limited by the state-of-the-art of supporting technologies, particularly the efficiency of engines and compressors and the quality of sealant materials. Due to these limitations, the helicopter industry proceeded along a path of shaft-driven propulsion systems. Unfortunately for the helicopter operator and for the public, the industry has proven to be resistant to innovation in much the same way that the American automobile industry was resistant to small, practical automobiles. But times and technologies have changed. Dramatic improvements have been made in engine and compressor efficiencies. Space-age materials are available today which substantially reduce aircraft weight and provide much more effective sealing of the air ducting system. Voljet International has utilized these technological advances to successfully develop and fly 3 prototypes over the last several years. The first APJ prototype was the H-100, built and flown in Arizona in 1972 as an initial step in evaluating advanced air pressure jet concepts. The flight test program emphasized development of the rotor system and analysis of the APJ's stability and performance. The second prototype, the H-200, was also built and test flown in Arizona in 1973 and 74. It had a larger rotor system and an improved structure and fuselage. Its flight test program was directed primarily towards extension of the flight envelope established by the H-100, with an emphasis on flight characteristics at higher speeds and increased payloads. The third prototype, the SX-255, was built and flown in California in 1982. It represented major improvements over the H-100 and H-200 in rotor and propulsion systems, as well as in overall performance. The SX-255 was a proof-of-concept prototype that led directly to the development of the Voljet 585. As stated before, the APJ has many significant advantages over shaft-driven helicopters. One of these advantages, mechanical simplicity, is best illustrated by comparing the drive components of the two systems. A typical shaft-driven helicopter has an engine, a primary reduction gearbox, a connecting drive shaft, a complex transmission with a disengage device, main rotor reduction gears and takeoff, tail rotor reduction gears and takeoff, main rotor drive shaft, main rotor hub, tail rotor drive shaft with support bearings, tail rotor gearbox, and a tail rotor. By comparison, the APJ helicopter simply has an engine, a compressor forcing air through a flexible hose, and a hollow hub and rotor system. Engine exhaust is ducted back to the rudder for directional control. This mechanical simplicity has tremendous significance. It means less maintenance, simpler maintenance, reduced spare parts requirements, and greater availability and reliability than for its shaft-driven competitor. The results are real dependability and real dollar savings. A second advantage of the APJ is that it is easy to fly. The freewheeling, high-inertia rotor system is free from the unstable cross-coupling that occurs with the use of controls in shaft-driven helicopters. The inherently gyroscopic rotor passes no stresses through the rotor hub or airframe and produces surprisingly little vibration. To demonstrate this stability, the pilot hovers the H-100 with both hands off the controls. The helicopter moves only in reaction to the change in center of gravity caused by the pilot's movements, or, of course, if pushed by the wind. This remarkable stability also exists in forward flight, as shown here by the H-200. If you watch closely, you can see the pilot's hands outside the window as he cruises by, demonstrating the same stability in forward flight that we saw in the hover. Here is another view of the SX-255, performing maneuvers near the ground. Notice the smooth, steady, vibration-free hover. This torqueless, gyroscopic stability makes the air pressure jet truly easy to fly. It is less demanding of pilot skills and reaction time, resulting in shorter or more productive training time, and in a greater number of successful pilot candidates. Its inherent stability, coupled with its high inertia rotor system, also gives the APJ helicopter the benefit of increased VTOL, that's vertical takeoff and landing, performance. The rotor operates safely across a wide range of RPM without requiring power changes. Thus, most maneuvers are accomplished with little, if any, worry about loss of rotor RPM. A unique maneuver, the dynamic climb, is one dramatic result. The APJ's rotor is sped up to its maximum RPM prior to takeoff, and the helicopter then leaps into the air at the pilot's demand. This technique is fully practical for overweight and obstacle clearing requirements. Next, we see a dynamic climb from the hover, followed by a rapid descent and immediate entry into another dynamic climb. This benefit can also be exploited in landing when altitude and weight considerations are apt to limit hovering ability. The fourth advantage over shaft-driven helicopters is in the APJ's reduced noise level. This is particularly important in urban areas, where noise is a major problem for shaft-driven helicopters, and for uses where it is desirable for the helicopter to remain undetected, as in certain police operations. Notice that the relatively low noise generated by the SX-255 does not include the blade slapping sound so commonly associated with most shaft-driven helicopters, nor, of course, is there any tail rotor or transmission noise. It should be noted that the SX-255 noise level is its inherent noise. No attempt at suppression was made. Noise suppression will, however, be undertaken on the 585, resulting in an even quieter machine. So far, we've seen an impressive list of advantages that the APJ has over its shaft-driven competitors. But probably the most important advantage is in the air pressure jet's greater safety. As already seen, the elimination of the instability related to torque significantly reduces the degree of pilot skill and attention required to safely fly a helicopter. thus reducing accidents attributed to pilot error. North American statistics covering 70% of the world's civil helicopters reflect that over 40% of their accidents result, in one way or another, from use of the shaft-driven system. The majority, if not all of these, would be eliminated with the APJ. For example, the lack of a tail rotor precludes all accidents associated with it, resulting in a significant improvement to both in-flight and ground safety. In an engine failure situation, the APJ helicopter has tremendous advantages over shaft-driven helicopters. Firstly, there is no need to rely upon a complex device to disengage the rotor from the transmission, since the APJ rotor always rotates freely. Secondly, the heavy rotor system provides very high inertia, resulting in a much slower rate of RPM decay than with shaft-driven rotor systems. The following engine-out maneuver by the SX-255 illustrates this. The passenger, to your right, signifies that the pilot has cut the engine with a quick wave of his arm. There. The helicopter maintains its hover for 4 seconds before it starts a smooth descent to a safe landing. In other flights, the SX-255 has maintained its hover for up to 8 seconds before descending, following engine stoppage. This means that safe, controlled, power-off landings can be made with the APJ from virtually any combination of altitude and airspeed. These advantages make the APJ helicopter significantly safer to operate than its common shaft-driven counterparts. This means lives saved and injuries avoided, as well as overall long-term cost effectiveness. The list of advantages of the air pressure jet helicopter over shaft-driven helicopters is an impressive one, particularly as its sole disadvantage of higher fuel consumption is heavily outweighed by its overall savings in direct operating costs. These advantages: mechanical simplicity, easy to fly, increased VTOL performance, reduced noise level, greater safety, and more are incorporated into the design of the Voljet 585 five-place civil helicopter. The delivery of the Voljet 585 to the world helicopter marketplace will be a major step forward for the helicopter industry and must ultimately lead to a reevaluation of design and performance standards by helicopter manufacturers around the world. All of these advantages and more are incorporated into the design of the Voljet 585 five-place civil helicopter, scheduled for delivery in 1987. The development of the Voljet 585 air pressure jet helicopter for commercial production will be a major step forward for the helicopter industry and could ultimately lead to a reevaluation of helicopter design and performance standards by helicopter manufacturers throughout the world.
Just briefly what a video camera does. I don't want to bog you down with a lot of details. This is what a video camera does. And just like the picture up there, where you see the camera connects to the radio cable. You point the camera and record some results. This is the portable. This simply, in the case of the portable, is connected to the retimer. When you want to take the portable radiator button, you got a little shoulder strap here. Camera connects to this. Oh, that's right. Yeah. So
here's the JVC high-end consumer camera, you know, which I'm actually quite impressed with. It does a pretty.
What it does.
You know, it does a pretty fair job. It's 7 lux, so it's very, very low light. But you are paying for a lot of bells and whistles.
Nice clear pictures.
But even two of these side by side, you can certainly tell which is the better camera.
Portable variety or a home variety.
We have cameras like this. Actually, we have the predecessor out in a number of industrial applications. The RCMP, for example, are using this the GXN 70, which is last year's model for this, in their ident sections. They'll actually go and shoot the scene of a crime or something like that, in addition to the traditional 35 millimeter. They've been getting some pretty phenomenal results. But the only reason they went for that camera was that this wasn't available, and there was really nothing in that line. Like, it was either this, or it was up into, as you say, a $9,000, $10,000 3-tube, which they couldn't justify at the time. But they are looking at adding more cameras now, and this is the one that they're looking at. We've got these, the University of Alberta Hospital.
It's good camera in its price range from what I've seen.
Yeah.
The Satacon, like I've noticed, see that was another difference between those two that I used the other day. One was Satacon, one was Nuvicon. And the Satacon has like just quite a bit, there's more tailing than like the one I was using. It was their 3500, and it was $2,000 camera. It was really tails from the lights and stuff. Even we have a clear plexiglass podium, and the lights reflecting off of that gave you a burning haze just off the, a glowing haze just off the podium. That Satacon too.
Well, you can see what's, you know, we're getting a certain amount of color shot here. I would dare say if I hook that up and Nuvicon up and get about the same.
Well, that's not too bad.
That's not too bad.
I noticed the difference with manufacturers.
Now, this is a pretty sophisticated package. Not only because it's a combination.
Oh, yeah.
and also
Like radio, all radio tires is the same. Radio tire.
That you could actually look this bottom tray up to your home stereo, the audio equipment. And you play back on the
Satacon tubes are a little more prone.
high fidelity means that the specifications, your audio quality is actually better than the stereo. This is good enough to actually take the result from your FM or from your record tapes, what have you, record the result. You can record 8 hours.
You certainly will tell which is like Satacon.
So, the other important thing is when you're dealing with this kind of thing, without getting too complicated, this also has sound records.
I can shoot in there, and you know, you can tell a little bit of difference in color between the red lights.
The other important thing is you tape something, you have a natural noise. Like here you have noise in the hospital, the arena. Then you want to put your voiceovers on. You can actually plug in a microphone inside here and have sound on sound. Maybe the old sound here plus or you might have something of a personal nature, family, what have you, where you have
Nuvicon is going to be
natural audio detail and whatever. You might want to put microphones. So this is the.
George is blowing the candles.
Well,
Look at Uncle George blowing the candles.
if
You might use this as promotional around the rest of the stuff. Anyways, that's the category.
No, we're open.
And
Garth, you work on Saturday, right?
Because we can see it. You can have a competition there.
Friday,
You
Friday,
can do
I'll tell you what, a lot of people now think that's a great idea because that's well rough. Other people have a little different. Other people have a little different thing. They carry on this by the home office, just like the first last Sunday. And then when they want to go global, instead of going into that,
You have a camera block.
and why this? See this in the back. It's separated in track. See this in the back.
what is JVC doing? Is this a fairly new camera, or are they going to be bringing out another one in the near future? Or is it something
That's your
up needing this in the near
Same size
future.
tape over there, not sitting there.
We don't buy something like this and then 2 weeks later.
No, I wanna play back on my home machine, say you have a shot at my stuff for this. If you wanna play it back on your own machine, actually, you don't even have to play back on your machine if you want, you just play this back to what you do with the TV set. Let's assume you did want to play back your own TV. What you do, put the tape into the adapter, close it up.
Cameras is where, especially in this business, a lot of the
So, you know, you kind of,
Oh, sure, I know you can't keep up with it, but
and I would be surprised if this time next year there'll be
you're gonna go traveling on a trip. Some people think this
Oh.
is the translated resolution. Other
oh,
people,
yeah, I appreciate that.
But there are cameras out, like
that concept,
gentleman had
you own a home
an
care,
GS 9
there's
GDC,
a third concept.
which was the consumer model, but it was more, I think it was just basically industrial model that they.
Just give it the money now, go.
He was looking at buying this, and
I heard he tried to have some
this camera's 2 years old. His was over,
third
his was
concept
over,
is
about
where
3
you
or
have a
4
home
lines
machine.
resolution.
That's always permanent in the home. Play back when you know, for
Other than going to a tablet or double lens and getting a color program.
and when you go out,
His
you
camera
want
was
to
still
shoot for the
So
camera.
I mean,
Some people don't.
other
like
than
it
a few
because they think
refinements, I don't think you're gonna find anything
you go traveling way
major
and
that's
carry
gonna
it.
make you say, oh,
Just carry it in a suitcase, you can hold it like this.
Yeah.
Won't be convenient.
Yeah.
But some people will instead, when they travel, go into a little camera like this, comes off the
I
tripod.
guess it was about a year and a
Yeah,
half.
that fits into a nice neat little bag.
He had a single tube industrial camera.
Visualize your embrace, you're out traveling, you can take some shots.
2000, still
That is here for traveling.
And they swear by him, and they were
And
very
then
sad to see.
for
Oh,
a recorder,
it was about a 6, 8
you
months
go into
lapse
a
from
tiny
the
little guy like this, you know, smaller.
And this came out, and it's just, it's really great.
And then you get the adapter.
But in terms of actual picture quality,
So, you know, we
we
have
have
a
a pretty
special
hard pressed to find a
different
different
ways.
This one is actually more salient feature of the color margin.
Very easy to travel.
Looks nice.
Record now. What do you do with this
But,
thing?
you know, they're still using it
Well,
as
you got
their
to play
place
this
to try
back
through these S62s and
Enjoy
drive.
it. Or you can probably run
This
the
machine,
machine to your home machine.
you know, it's a big investment for you.
End up with an hour and a half on the tape. And you only want to use 10 minutes. And you got a lot of lousy shots. Do an edit.
Well, I realize
Only
the
transfer
year or
what
two
you
from now,
want.
just replace it.
Now, the size of this tape is a completely different
I
size.
think what you're gonna
This, believe it or
find
not,
happening
is
is
1.5
that
hours.
consumer thing is becoming much more,
Isn't that amazing? Somebody told you I had a
it's
videotape
becoming
my
more
project.
sophisticated. We've even got consumer cameras with Genlock facilities. There's a Genlock port right there. You know, it's the first consumer camera with Genlock.
And,
And most consumers
You can
don't
get
know
2
what
hours
I'm
on
talking
that
about.
basis.
Sony's talking about coming up with a little switcher, SCG, special effects generator switcher, in the next year, year and a half, which means that the average consumer will be able to marry up 2 cameras and do 2 camera shoots. So if you come up with